what is their argument the other way?
Their argument is that they need this information in order to determine whether states are complying with the National Voter Registration Act, which is essentially about list maintenance and deleting outdated records. To which we say, you can have the public version of the voter file, fill out this form, pay the $500. You can have the same info that everybody else can. It just doesn't have that private personal information that can be used for other purposes. And if your true intent is to assess our compliance with the National Voter Registration Act, there's lots of other ways to do that. You don't need the individual records of voters to do that. You can look at the activities that we're undertaking, that you can look at the number of registrations, you can look at the things we're doing without looking at individual data.
Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast focused on incredibly talented people who've dedicated themselves to public service when their country and communities needed it the most. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bultan of the NewDEAL, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. The NewDEAL is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. Check out newdealleaders.org to find out more.
My guest on today's show is Tobias Read, Oregon's Secretary of State. We had a great and really timely conversation about our election system heading into November, threats to our democracy, and how to restore faith in government by making it work better. Secretary Read shared his reflections on his state's recent primary election, his experience being sued by the Trump administration, and what other states can learn from Oregon's success in elections, including with their decades-long, very popular vote-at-home system. This Memorial Week, our conversation was really a great reminder of the sacrifices that so many have made to protect our democracy and our right to vote, and ensuring that we have free and fair and secure elections is not a partisan idea, but a patriotic one. I hope you enjoy. Secretary Tobias Read, welcome back to An Honorable Profession.
Great to be with you, Debbie. Thanks.
So happy to see you as always, my friend. And appreciate you coming back on to the show right now when we've got so much to talk about on the democracy front, on elections. I know you guys just got through, you were one of the primary states last week, and would just love you, as we were talking about before we came on air, it's a little bit of a dry run for November. How did the elections go? What did you learn? How are you feeling?
We're feeling good. We had strong turnout. We beat our turnout for 24 and 22. And Oregon is, as a lot of our listeners know, was the very first state to move all of our voting system to the mail. And we love it. Oregonians chose this. We lead the nation in terms of turnout, and we do it with lower cost and higher security. It allows people to fit voting into their busy lives. And I feel like sometimes I want to drive by the folks who are standing in line in other states and yell at them supportively. You don't have to do this. You know, in Oregon, the ballot comes to you. You can take your time. You can consult any resources you want. You can make informed decisions, and then you've got the ability to get it back on your schedule. You don't have to stand in line. You don't have to get a babysitter. You don't have to take time off work. And it results in a better democracy because more eligible people are participating. That's how we hold politicians and government accountable. So we really love it. And the heroes of this whole thing, as is true across the country, are the local elections officials, the people who are doing the hard work of making sure that the rolls are accurate, that people who are supposed to get ballots are getting them, and that they're counted accurately. So all that is just really good practice. It's good reps for us as we head into November. And we don't want to keep any of this secret, by the way, or to ourselves. We are happy to help other states who want to move in this direction and make it more convenient for eligible people to vote. That's in the interest of democracy, and we want more of that.
That's great. I mean, I didn't hear any glitches in Oregon or any of the other 5 states that voted last week. If there were any problems in the primary voting. Have you heard anything during primary season about anything kind of not going well?
I mean, I'm definitely focused on Oregon more than anything else. And there are always things that we can improve in terms of smoothness and process and that sort of thing. But what we want, I'm quoting our fellow New Dealer, Steve Simon here, we want the same outcome in every election, which is high turnout and low drama. And so far, we've managed to achieve that. The work never really stops because, of course, we're a few days after Election Day, but now the folks across the state are doing the work of moving towards a certification of the votes, and we have a grace period in Oregon where if a ballot is postmarked by Election Day and arrives at the elections office by mail within 7 days, it can still be counted. That, of course, is if the U.S. Supreme Court does not rule in the case out of Mississippi. But right now, we're still getting a few of those ballots in. Our clerks are making sure that they are accurately recorded, and then we'll go through some audits. If there is a need for a recount, we have paper ballots, and that's easy to do. So all of these things add up to a really secure, accurate, and fair system in Oregon, and I think Oregonians are really proud of that.
Yeah, that's so awesome. You wrote an op-ed recently with Congresswoman Bonamici, and I loved the title of it. I think it was in the Hill, which I think is exactly right. Which is when we're going to talk a little bit about all of the fronts where it feels like there's conversations and even fights happening about, different ways to vote, access to ballot, all those things. But you guys, the title of your op-ed was "Your Right to Hold Politicians Accountable is Under Attack." And I loved that framing of it, because I think sometimes we talk about the process, but it's important to remember kind of why we're doing this at all, which is this is the system we use to elect our elected representatives and make sure that if we're not happy with what they're doing, there's a process to vote somebody else in. So, I just wanted to flag that, and just the big picture before we look at some of these smaller, important but individual things we're talking about.
Right, there are too many people who have sacrificed too much to give us this right for us to do anything but take it seriously. And if the campaigns or the interviews, the votes are the verdicts on those interviews. Are we hiring this person? Are we giving them an extension? Or are we saying we need somebody else? That's what needs to happen. And it's really clear also, I'm sure we'll get into this too, the Constitution says really clearly states get to decide how to do that. And Oregon and 20 plus other states right now are suing the president again over this illegal executive order that he has promulgated. We're not going to let the federal government take that over.
Yeah, well, let's start there. So, there's so many fronts, and you guys have been really active. You've been part of lawsuits and other things. So we've got, and I would love, as we go through some of these, I think for the lay person who's not following this day to day, it's just a lot, like everything with the Trump administration. It's by design. It's like a flood the zone, right? So what am I supposed to be worried about? What am I not supposed to be worried about?
Yeah, exactly. I give the Trump administration for credit for one thing, which is just the speed and the relentlessness with which they do that, because it can be overwhelming. And I think that's part of the point. It's easy to forget what this is. And we got to be clear about that. It is an unrelenting attack on democracy, on that very concept of being able to hold government accountable. And I think that is because they know that what they're doing is unpopular. And that when Americans get that free, fair election, their congressional majorities are at risk. So they're going to great lengths to try to make it harder for eligible American citizens to vote. And it started from the very start. They gutted CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. This is the agency that our county clerks, who don't have a lot of cash sitting around, rely on for cyber threat alerts and incident plans and physical security assessments and all this sort of stuff. CISA did that work, and they're basically gone now. Then they had
what do they do? And what happens now? What do they do without that?
Well, we're trying to step up as the federal government is stepping back. We're trying to step up. We're partnering with our fusion center, our Titan Fusion Center in Oregon, with the military department, with external groups to try and fill those gaps. But it's certainly easier to do that when we have the federal government who is actually doing that. The two real threats to democracy and to elections are that kind of thing. Those cyber threats and foreign interference, the kinds of things that CISA was prepared to deal with, and the fact that not everybody who is eligible is voting. Even in Oregon, where we lead the country, we're very proud of getting to 75, 80% in a presidential general election. That means 20 or 25% who are eligible are not doing it. So earning people's trust, their confidence, their willingness to engage is a big part of it. One of the highlights for me of 2025 was visiting every county clerk. There were 36 of them in Oregon, in their offices, seeing what they're doing, and they're all really committed to it. But one thing, and I'm very confident, 100% confident this is true across the country, every one of those county clerks welcomes people to come and see what they do. Come and visit, walk through the process. They will answer your questions. They will assure you about all the things that happen. And just like in campaigns, the most effective thing is someone you know and trust. So a person who has had that experience is so much more credible and effective with their neighbors and friends and family and say, no, I've been there. I know how this system works. And it's much easier to knock down all this misinformation and nonsense that is circulating out there about how voting works. So those are the most important.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I think I want to underscore one of those points you're making, which is I think too often Democrats, when people have legitimate questions, like roll our eyes and say, elections are fine, it's secure. Like what? And if you question it, you're somehow, unpatriotic or, whatever. And it's like, no, actually what you said is right, which is like, no, there are a subset of people for whom this is a partisan issue that nothing you say is going to change their mind. But for a lot of people, it's like, no, I'm really curious, like what does happen to my ballot once I live in California where I get my text, right? Your ballot's been mailed, we received your ballot's been counted. I mean, but that transparency of just like, well, how do you know? And answering those questions, I think as Democrats in particular, we've got to be super transparent, like you're saying, and be willing to answer legitimate questions about just how does this work? Because I'm hearing all this stuff, right? And let me walk you through the process, right? I think that's really important for elected officials. Yeah. Let's start with the mail-in ballot executive order, because that's a big one. And particularly, as you said, Oregon's been leading the way on this for so many years.
Well, there's two of them. That's what's kind of ridiculous.
Okay, there was good. I don't even know that.
There was a year plus ago that the first attempt at this that basically aimed at making it harder for people to vote and dealing with mail-in elections, and lots of different states sued on it. We sued with Washington State, and it's illegal. I can say that definitively now because the court said that, and it's not in effect. But then I think the more recent one really is an attempt to enact the Save America Act by executive order because they can't pass it, thankfully, through the Senate. Decided to try it through executive order. But it's no different. Article 1, Section 4, it says really clearly states run elections. The president does not have a role in that. So 20 plus other states, in addition to Oregon, were all suing on this, and I'm very confident that they're gonna read the Constitution the way we do and say, no, you can't do that. States get to determine how to run elections. It does a whole bunch of stuff in there, and it is in a lot of ways parallel to the Save America Act, but at its base, it is creating barriers between eligible American citizens and the way that they want to vote. It's bad policy. It's reckless. It's expensive. You don't change the rules in the middle of a game. All of those things I could take up probably all the time we have talking about why it's a bad idea and why it's ineffective and unnecessary and all the rest. But I'm not going to let it go.
So essentially, in terms of where it is, it's in the courts now. You're confident for all the reasons you said that it'll be meet a similar fate to the last one.
Yes.
So you guys are doing your due diligence, but there's no change while we wait for some kind of court verdict. There's nothing.
No, right? I mean, this is an unserious thing to say that the federal government is going to create a voter eligibility list, and that is going to determine who the U.S. Postal Service can send a ballot to. That they would be barred from sending a ballot to someone who's not on that list. And just to show how unpractical this was, or impractical, this was when this was issued. We were somewhere like 4 or 5, maybe 6 weeks ahead of our own primary. And in that executive order, it makes a reference to 60 days before the election. Well, this comes out, we have 40 something days till our election. They're not serious about this. It is, if they're, to your earlier point, there are issues with the way elections could be smoother. But if you were serious about that, it takes actual diligence and investment and real effort, none of which this administration clearly has any interest in undertaking.
Yeah. You mentioned the post office, which is really interesting because it's something I've heard, and there's so many theories and blah, 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 but I've heard that there's a, concern that there could be a point at some point before the election, like right before the election. Actually, I think this came up at our conference. Some of your fellow secretaries of states were talking with us where, you could essentially have the ballots, sent out, but not not delivered yet, and have the federal government shut down the post office or something and say, for whatever reason, we're actually just. So are you having to think about like contingency plans given how much
Yeah.
you rely on mail-in voting if something happens?
Yes. Yes, we're 100% vote by mail. Although I like to say vote at home because that's a little bit more useful. We certainly rely on the Postal Service to deliver the ballots, but we've been trying to change our messaging and saying if you can find your way to a drop box, that's better. In Oregon, there are 321 of them across the state. We're working on building that up. If you can get there, you don't have to worry about the Postal Service on getting your ballot back. And yeah, we have to be concerned about anything that can disrupt that. It's not just a manufactured disaster like the one we have in the White House right now. It can be natural disasters too. And we have some experience with that. A few years ago, wildfires are a big deal in Oregon, as they are in some other places in the country. Our clerks can figure out how to get ballots to people who don't have a home too. So we're working on those. And I'd like to say, and I think about what Mike Tyson famously said about plans. Remember, he said everyone has one until they get hit in the face.
Right.
So more about tools than plans. But I think it is impossible to predict with accuracy what threat is going to come from this administration or wildfire or natural disaster zone. So we've got to be developing the tools to respond to all of those things. And yes, I think Oregonians can be confident we'll be ready for those things, and I'm sure that is true in other states. Thinking particularly of Arizona and Colorado and Minnesota and the other places where we have NewDEAL secretaries of state.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of lawsuits, another big one you're part of is the kind of federal grab of sensitive voter data. Where is that? How does that impact everyday people? What should we know about that?
Very interesting. So when people ask me what was the highlight or most surprising thing about the first year as Secretary of State, I said I did not expect to be in a federal courtroom as a defendant. But I was, because it was an interesting sort of scenario. They started saying, hey, we'd like to have the federal government. We want to have a conversation with you about voter misconduct, and let's have a partnership. And I said, no, thank you. Not interested. I can see what else you're doing. The next communication was a demand for our full unredacted voter file. This it includes partial social security numbers and full dates of birth and driver's license numbers and that sort of thing. And I said, nope, you don't have that legal authority. You've not talked about the purpose that you want this for. You've not talked about how you would comply with Privacy Act requirements. And so I said no. And then they sued me. And so I went to court to listen, and it was very interesting. They continue to rely on the Civil Rights Act of 1960 as the basis of their claim. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but in this argument, this hearing around our motion to dismiss, the federal judge essentially said, I think you've got this backwards. The Civil Rights Act was about including people, not excluding people. And he did something pretty unusual. He dismissed the case. He ruled from the bench. So before he left the courtroom, said, I'm going to dismiss this case. And he did so. So this last week, on Election Day, in fact, I listened online to the oral arguments in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, where the federal government is appealing that dismissal. So it's it was not the Supreme Court, but there was a similarity in that both the U.S. Department of Justice, the Oregon Department of Justice, and the Elias law firm as interveners, those lawyers were making arguments, and they often did not get more than a few sentences in before the various judges would interrupt with questions and back and forth. And so I don't know how quickly they will rule, but it had some really similar dynamics to the conversation I witnessed in person in district court. So we'll see where it goes, but I'm pretty optimistic that the court will continue to uphold the Constitution. And the right to privacy for Oregonians and Americans. And we're a little bit ahead of other states. Ours was the first action that was dismissed, but it was followed pretty quickly by California and Massachusetts and several other states where I think they're also appealing.
And what is the argument for, to your point, I think you were saying they've not ever made a case on why they need this or what they're going to do with it or how they're going to protect it. What are they saying in court about why and it's obviously a violation of states running elections, all the things you said, but what is their argument the other way?
Their argument is that they need this information in order to determine whether states are complying with the National Voter Registration Act, which is essentially about list maintenance and deleting outdated records. to which we say, you can have the public version of the voter file, fill out this form, pay the $500. You can have the same info that everybody else can. It just doesn't have that private personal information that can be used for other purposes. And if your true intent is to assess our compliance with the National Voter Registration Act, there's lots of other ways to do that. You don't need the individual records of voters to do that. You can look at the activities that we're undertaking, that you can look at the number of registrations, you can look at the things we're doing without looking at individual data.
Yeah, that's super helpful. You also talked about changing the rules in the middle of the game. Hard to talk about elections right now without the redistricting effort going on, kind of supercharged with the new Supreme Court ruling on the Voter Rights Act. How are you thinking about all of that, and both in terms of how it might affect Oregon, but just kind of in general about where we are as a country on this?
It's not good that this has become the new norm, and I hesitate even to say that because I hope we're not at that point. But it's hard. I mean, we have to be in a system where districts are where people are picking their representatives and not the other way around. I was on the redistricting committee in Oregon in 2011, and it's harder than it looks. I mean, the statute says that districts have to have the same number of people. They have to be compact and contiguous. And the most difficult thing is that they cannot divide a community of interest. The problem is that community of interest is not defined. So that could be a city, a county, a school district, a watershed, a demographic group, all of those things. And so when you have to have an exact same number of people, that's going to create funny looking shapes. So a funny looking shape by itself is not evidence of gerrymandering. You got to get X number of additional people in that district. It's going to be some bulge off some side to make that happen. There is, I don't think, any magic system that can do it. It's people talk about independent commissions, and I often say, independent from what? Humans are humans, and they have affiliations and preferences and all that. It has to be, I think, about a process that allows people to participate and understand the consequences of this. I read an article some months ago that was it's kind of funny to think about, and I don't know exactly how it would work in the context of redistricting, but it compared the experience many of us who have siblings probably had as a kid, where if there's one cookie left and the parent wants it divided, the solution, as at least in our family probably was for you, one person divides it, the other person picks which one.
Right. I love that. Yeah, we did that with our kids.
And there are ways this article sort of tried to apply that and saying, well, if one party draws the districts and the other one picks them, and there's some interesting things like that.
That's interesting. That is interesting.
But
you guys are not, but you're not caught up in the, I'm again sitting here in California, where we definitely were one of the states in this partisan redistricting fight. And I think, I will say in California for sure, people voted, including me, to redraw the districts with a heavy heart. Like, we love our independent redistricting. I loved how we did in California, which said this only goes into effect if Texas does it. This is going to be temporary, all those things. But you guys are not, you're not looking at redrawing your lines at this point, right?
If that were to come, it would come from the legislature. And I feel somewhat remote at this point, because we have a total of 6 congressional districts. 5 of them presently are held by Democrats. And we are, population trends and so on, we're likely to lose one in the next census. So I think we're down the list as far as people who are trying to do that. If it happens, it comes from the legislature, and that's not going to be something that I will be excited about, much like you.
No, it's so hard. What might all of this stuff? Well, first of all, is there anything I didn't talk about that, when you're thinking about the threats? You've got the mail-in, the threats to mail-in ballot. We've got the data issues. We've got the redistricting issues. What else is on your minds? I mean, so we didn't talk about dis and misinformation. Maybe that's a big one.
That is, and I think just the fundamental operations of the election in November. We talked about how we're prepared for what might happen with the post office, but this is an administration that is openly mused about sending troops to polling places. First of all, that's illegal. There's federal law that says that. We are less vulnerable to that, I think, in Oregon because you don't have to go to a specific place at a specific time. You could mail your ballot back. You could drop it in a Dropbox. There are lots of those. So we're in a stronger position. But we don't want anything that would intimidate someone from participating or try to have an influence on how they choose to vote, those sorts of things. And I think about that across the country, too, particularly in states who have not followed our lead in making mail-in, universal mail-in available. So I'm definitely worried about that. They're going to try to sow chaos and doubt and try to make it easier for people to just say, "Oh, I'm not going to participate." That is another thing that I'm worried about for ourselves and for every American.
Yeah, and in this op-ed you wrote, you also had a line which I love, which is about that the voting, making sure that our voting is free and fair and secure. It should not be a partisan issue. It's a patriotic issue. I assume that I know from past conversations with you and other New Deal Secretary of States, this is a pretty bipartisan thing at the Secretary of State level around the country, or it has been, right? That you guys work really well together. Is that remain true? I'm just kind of curious.
So I am probably, I guess I'm the newest of the New Deal Secretaries of State. So my sample size is smaller. I have been a little disappointed that there are some secretaries of state who will say this sort of thing behind closed doors and acknowledge that the SAVE Act is nonsense, and there are less willing to do that in public. Sadly, these do follow partisan lines. There are Republicans who are willing to say that. I think particularly Val Schmidt in Pennsylvania, who is right out front and understands, I think, the reality of all this. But it's not perfect. I think it's similar to how you can see some things in Congress, and we hear from our friends that there are Republican members of Congress who will acknowledge reality behind closed doors and find it harder to do so in public. So I think that's true amongst secretaries of state too. We're all humans, and we all got that same kind of vulnerability. But the numbers don't lie. You just can look at the better turnout in mail-in states. You can look at the security. You can't hack paper ballots. We can go back and recount them when we need to. We audit them. We verify every signature. All of those, everything you can think about has been accounted for. This is a strong system. It's the gold standard, and I think over time we'll be able to move more and more states in that direction.
I love that. You kind of alluded to this, was we were talking about like the fact that Oregonians are proud of the system and feel good about it. I mean, if you heard, as you're going around the country talking to people, are you feeling that still? Is there more concern? Is there an uptick of just because of all of the stuff they're hearing all the time, or are people feeling pretty good about things?
In Oregon, people do feel good about it still. There's a group that is trying to gather signatures to put a proposal on the ballot to end vote by mail. A senator, actually now somebody who was running for the U.S. Senate, put a measure in front of the legislature to refer that question to voters. And it was interesting because for 20 some years, Oregonians have been able to submit testimony on legislation in front of the legislature by electronic means. This particular proposal that would have asked Oregonians whether they want to continue vote by mail set the record for online testimony. It actually broke the system, and 85%, I think, of people who submitted testimony said, no, we want to keep mail-in voting. This was chosen by voters. Originally a Republican idea and opposed by Democrats, but the point of all that, I think, is that it does not favor anyone except voters. It makes it easier, and that's something we should all be in favor of.
Yeah, I just don't understand why this has become a partisan issue. There's some things you're just like, this does. I mean, vote by mail plays a big role in Utah, right? A very Republican, reliably Republican state. I don't know why we think that voting at home is a partisan issue. It makes no sense.
It isn't. And to follow up a better answer, perhaps to your earlier question, again, meeting with those 36 county clerks in Oregon, there are some very red counties. There are some very red county clerks who I'm very confident voted for the president. And every one of them said, this is nonsense. This is not about voter integrity and election security. This is about making it harder for the veteran who lives out a long way from town, the disabled person, the person who can't drive, all of that stuff. That's what it's about. And those county clerks did not hold back, saying, I'm not having this. It would cost 3 times as much to have an in-person election. There are many clerks who have never done that. Think about how much harder that would be for the administration, for the individual voters. A bunch of those county clerks, like, I'm not doing that. If this ends, I'm quitting. That's a threat to democracy too. To have people, these experienced people who are committed, having to make that sort of a transition. No thanks.
Yeah. I wish we had more time to talk about this, but I'll throw a really big question. See if you can do it relatively. But we've talked. We've known each other a very long time. We've been friends for a long time, and of which I'm grateful for. And one of our perennial conversations, which feels very relevant right now, is restoring trust in government generally, and making sure that that people feel like. I mean, that's I guess just sacrosanct to democracy, right? Having faith in government is having faith in democracy. So, when you think about how we can improve that, like what are some of the top things that are on your mind? It's a very big question. We could do a whole hour just on that, I know.
We totally could. And I've got lots of things in mind. But with respect to my current role as Secretary of State, 2 things come to mind. One is the mechanics of voting. So what I want, in addition to what Steve Simon always says about high turnout and low drama, I want people at the end to say, even if my side lost, if my preferred candidate or issue did not prevail, my reaction should be, I got to go convince more people, not immediately that there's something wrong with the system. This is not one-sided. On election night in 2024, I was, of course, with a bunch of Democrats, and it didn't take long before somebody said, Kamala Harris could not have lost. This is rigged. I'm like, we got beat. I don't like it.
Right.
But
I don't like it.
That's not what we need to be about. That is true for both sides. We've got to be about understanding the process, understanding the system, and respecting people's opinions. Adlai Stevenson famously said, the people have spoken, the beep. That's where we've got to. That's where we got to get. So that's why I say go visit your county clerk, understand the process, look at all the checks and all the security that is built in so you can have confidence that even if you don't like the outcome, it is legitimate. The second piece is a little unusual. For me, a lot of states have separately elected state auditors. In Oregon, that's a role I get to fill as well. And it's frankly exciting to think about the power that authority carries with it to really try to narrow the gap between good intentions and good or great outcomes. It's one thing to pass a bill. It is another thing to make sure that policy or that program is well implemented. So we get to go check on that as auditor and say, is this, can Oregonians feel good about how their money is being spent, about how that program is operating efficiently and effectively? And as Democrats, I think we got to be about that, not about a contest to see what's the most progressive thing that we can pass, what's the volume of that. How do we make sure that government is showing up in people's lives in ways that they can see and feel, and is making their lives easier, making them feel like they've got a future, like their kids and grandkids have got opportunities. It's tangible, real stuff. It's not just I passed a bill. It's how did you make somebody's life better? That's what I get to do in a lot of ways around the audit function. But all of us who are involved in NewDEAL and whatever our role is, I look for those places where we can focus on execution and outcomes.
Yeah, I hear here on that. I couldn't agree more. And as we often say to each other, as Democrats who believe that government has a role to play, we have a special responsibility to make it work well. And I think that's right now with so much disaffection and people are really hurting, like we just have to deliver for people, because that's what's going to keep them engaged and not checking out. And that's what we need to have a functioning representative democracy, period. I so
appreciate the way you said that. And just to emphasize the last point you made, when things get dangerous, when people have the feeling that this government does not understand me or work for me, I'm checking out. You said it, and I just really want to underline that. We've seen that in Oregon, the Malheur takeover, various other things. That it's not theoretical. It is dangerous. It is scary. We have to be in a spot where even if we if we disagree, people are saying, well, I don't like that outcome, but it's still better for me to be engaged than to check out.
Yeah. Well, here. Thank you for that. Thank you for staying engaged. This is such an important role you're playing. We are so grateful. Oregonians, I know, are grateful. You're doing a great job, and really
Thank
just
you.
happy to support you and what you're doing. So thanks for being on today.
I'm here in large part because of the New Deal. This is a great group, and I get a lot of fuel and a lot of motivation from the team that you've assembled. So great thanks go to you as well.
Thank you so much.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. And because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars were used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.